59251, appearing on behalf of the state of Oregon. Sean Overstreet, Overstreet, bar number 114859. Ms. Brophy is present. Today is day 9 of the trial.
All right, Ms. Herman.
Good morning, Your Honor. Nicole Herman, Hermann, bar number 126353.
Good morning, Your Honor. Madeline Loeb, also appearing on behalf of the state, spelled Loeb, bar number 173970.
All right, Ms. Weinmiller.
Good morning, Your Honor. Chris Weinmiller appearing with Ms. Brophy. Weinmiller is Winemiller, and my bar number is 863177.
All right, and Ms. Maxfield.
Yes, and Lisa Maxfield appearing with Ms. Brophy as well. My bar number is 844337. My last name is spelled Maxfield.
All right. Well, I should mention that I did this morning see and review two motions, I'll just call it that. I just wanted to check, has the state had a chance to see these two?
We did get a chance to read them, yes.
Okay, so let me just first ask, because one addresses a specific witness, Megan Light. Is Ms. Light anticipated to testify today?
Yes, Your Honor. She was originally scheduled for last Thursday because of some scheduling issues. We rescheduled her for this morning. We anticipate calling her first.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, then, so just so both sides know, I did reread Carter again, and my reading of the opinion is that a witness can testify as to a person's demeanor or what they observed the witness to do. However, I think where the line gets drawn is when they start to express an opinion as to whether what they observed was normal or indicative of dishonesty. That's how I'm reading the opinion. I will tell defense I don't think that what this witness has to say falls into a prior act category, which is in my mind, a different analysis. But I do see at least the potential for what she's saying to cross over into testimony that would not be permissible under Carter. So I do think we should have a 104 hearing to hear what she's going to say, unless you want to address any of this before we call in the witness.
You want to hear from me first?
Well, I guess we can start with defense, but since I don't know if defense knows what she's going to say other than what's in this written material, I guess I'll ask defense if you want to comment on, I think I understand your argument on impermissible opinion. I guess I don't understand an argument, to the extent there is one, that this is somehow prior act or other act evidence.
Your Honor, we filed a more general request for notice of other acts. And so I think with any witness that we're asking for a 104 hearing, we're going to include that just to be protective. When Mr. Brophy testified, Jack Brophy testified, he brought up other act evidence that we were not anticipating from him. So we don't know whether that sort of thing would come up with Ms. Light. That is not our primary concern.
Okay.
In addition to the report that I excerpted in that motion, we also have a longer audio of the same conversation. And in it, she's very critical of our client, but she's also very critical of Jack Brophy and others. There's just a lot of opinion and frankly judgment about what she sees at the memorial service, and we don't think any of that is relevant or admissible.
All right, so I guess before we hear from her, I should ask the state whether or not the state agrees regarding, I guess, my reading of Carter and what's permissible and what's not permissible.
I do agree with Your Honor's reading of that. And I think the only thing that I'm not sure that Carter actually addresses is when somebody, especially when they know somebody for a long time, and they've seen them in stressful situations, good situations, celebrated with them, mourned with them, that they maybe do have a prior knowledge of that person and what they expected that particular person to do or say in a given situation. I don't actually anticipate that. I'm just saying that I think that is a scenario where somebody has so much personal knowledge of somebody else that if they were to say something like, and I think what might come up in this case, when I spoke with her, her reaction to me or what she said to me struck me as odd.
Mm-hmm.
I think that that is permissible because they're saying this is different from what I expect of you knowing you. I think that's different from a stranger who says, well, I spoke with Miss Brophy and she wasn't crying. And so I thought that that was weird. I think there's a difference between those two things. And I do think there's some potential for that. Now, what I've done is I'm instructing these witnesses to not formulate an opinion about Miss Brophy's reactions to things. Based on the Carter reading and what I think Your Honor is saying. I've instructed them to not do that. But I think that that is different from them saying, I thought that that was odd, that she said this thing to me. I think that's different than, well, she wasn't crying, so, you know, that seems strange. And I expect that if you just lost your husband that you must cry. I don't think that that's permissible, and I'm instructing people to not say things like that.
Well, why don't we, and there may, you know, some of these things, you get to a very fine point on what people say or don't say, and I would agree there may be some difference between a witness who is intimately familiar with another person as opposed to one who is not. But why don't we bring her in and have a 104 hearing just so I can hear what she's going to say, and I can see if there's any specific objection to anything she's going to say, and if so, we'll address it.
And she's here, she's available, she's ready. I'm a little concerned about ironically, defense's request for a 104 hearing, because this really should be about the basis of her knowledge, not how she might answer a question. And I think that may be a little bit of a misuse of the 104 hearing. They have their objections. If something were to come out or begin to be said, like I said, we're taking precautions as well. We're instructing these people not to say these things. I certainly don't intend to try to draw it out. Do you think it's a little bit of a misuse of 104 hearing to try to get Your Honor to rule on maybe even a certain line of questioning that is permissible, but they've drawn out something in the 104 hearing that they think is objectionable. So I don't think it's a proper use of 104 hearing. I think it's a little ironic we find ourselves in this situation where we're arguing that, because I just don't think that that's what the 104 hearing is for.
So let me ask this. You've mentioned that this witness knows Ms. Brophy, and what is the basis of knowledge? How long have they known each other? How do they know each other? I need to have some idea.
Sure, they've known each other for over 30 years.
Okay. And so let me ask defense then, if this witness were to say something along the lines of, I thought the way she was behaving was odd based on my knowledge of her, what would the defense position be on a comment like that?
Well, Your Honor, let me just start by saying that Mr. Overstreet, while he says that he agrees with the court's ruling, then carves out an exception to his agreement with the court's ruling that essentially swallows the entire agreement. In the report that I excerpted in the motion, and it's very short, I'd be happy to forward this to the court if you'd like to review it yourself, Your Honor. But in that report where Detective Merrill is essentially condensing this longer audio, and we also have the audio available, and I will tell the court that the audio is even more concerning than the report. But Detective Merrill's condensation of that conversation includes this statement. Light told me she wasn't really close to either one of them, but that she has just known them for several years. And it's our understanding that she had not seen our client for well over a decade, and maybe even 2 decades, that there had been a very considerable period of time that had passed since they'd seen each other. So we have Ms. Light's own characterization that she's not close to either one of them, and additional information that we think we can draw out that in fact she doesn't have much basis of knowledge.
All right, but what are the statements in particular you're worried she might say, either from the synopsis you've given me or from the audio that you've heard?
Well, the ones that were particularly concerning in the motion, the pleading that we filed, I had highlighted in yellow, and then I turned that into italics, and I think it's at the end of both of those sections. There are additional statements, many additional statements that are concerning in the audio. She characterizes both Mr. Jack Brophy's reaction and our client's reaction as that seems odd, and she doesn't relate it to that's odd because I know them and for them that's
Right.
unusual. It's just my opinion is that
Okay.
signifies something really wrong. And it's clearly a statement in which she is casting shade on both their credibility and potentially on culpability. And it just has no place in this trial. It doesn't matter what Megan Light's opinion of these things is. She also ends in the audio. She talks about and it's interesting. I should point out that what she's critical of Jack Brophy about is that his reaction is different from the defendant's. Jack Brophy apparently made some comment to her, at least as she now recalls it, and she's making these statements in March of 2019, not contemporaneously. She initiates this contact with Detective Merrill March 9th? No, March 13th, I think, of 2019. But she's critical of him because he apparently has made a comment to her, at least as she now recalls it, he's made a comment to her that he doesn't feel a need to know exactly what happened, that he would prefer that they not be tied up in this, sort of tumult that goes on for years. On the other hand, she says our client says she does want to know what happened, but she doesn't like her phrasing. She doesn't like exactly the way she remembers later, 9 months later, how she phrased that expression of desire to know what had happened. And then there's some talk about whether she liked the way our client phrased her comments about OCI putting on a spread, providing the catering for that event. And then she ends by making this comment, and I didn't really even understand it, but it was clearly disparaging. So I left there feeling that she, meaning the defendant, is either in shock or she got some good drugs. I don't know what's going on, but that's not normal. I get cold even thinking about it now. So all of that's concerning. It's also odd, and I think I forwarded this voicemail to your clerk earlier and to the prosecution. She leaves a voicemail for our client very shortly after the memorial service. I think it's on July 8th of 2018, so much closer in time to the event. And it's a very friendly, comforting voicemail. She doesn't sound cold. She doesn't sound like she thought something was wrong at all. So there are just a number of reasons that we're concerned both about her basis of knowledge, whether she's recalling this in a way that's in any way consistent or accurate with her own earlier statements, and whether it has any business being put before the jury.
All right, so a couple of things. First, is the state intending to elicit testimony about her reaction to Jack Brophy?
No.
Okay, so, and then with regard to some of this, it seems like there's a discrepancy between the two sides as to how well Miss Light actually knows Miss Brophy, whether she's known her for 30 years, which you can know someone for 30 years, but not have contact for 10 or 20 years, which is what defense is saying.
Yeah.
And to me, that would be different than someone who sees a person every day for 30 years. But at the end of it, any kind of comment about, certainly she can describe demeanor, she can describe comments that Miss Brophy made to her, but if she wants to talk about how it was unusual or odd, I could only consider that if it's in connection with her knowledge of how Miss Brophy normally is, which I'm not inclined to allow if what we're talking about is she hadn't seen her in a decade. So I don't know if you know the answer to that or not as to how recently they saw each other, but if that's going to potentially be a disputed issue, we probably should have her in at least for me to get some understanding about what she's going to be saying is odd or unusual and why she's saying it.
I understood, Your Honor, and I think that the nature of the relationship, I think, does go back over 3 decades. Miss Light knew Miss Brophy at the culinary school when Miss Brophy attended there, and then she worked at Miss Brophy's catering business. And then Miss Light also got a real estate license after, sometime in there, and actually sold Miss Brophy and Mr. Brophy their home that we've discussed. So although I agree with you, I think that it's possible to go 10 years without seeing somebody, yet you consider a lengthier relationship. But I think they do know each other quite
Okay.
well.
But I still don't know, when I read like an excerpt such as this, Miss Light told me, Nancy said, I just want to know how it went down. I have no issue with that. Then there's the next sentence. Light felt that was very odd, but I don't know why she felt it was odd.
Right.
And that's where it could get into areas that I might agree with defense are prohibited. So I do think, to the extent the state seeks to elicit certain statements or reactions were unusual or odd, I would want to have her for a 104 hearing so I can understand why she felt that way. If the state is not planning to elicit that certain reactions were unusual or odd, then we don't need the 104 hearing. But it sounds like you do want to elicit some of that, and I just need to know more about why she felt that way.
Sure. And Your Honor, I guess that what I can say is that I don't intend to elicit just a blanket statement of I think that that was odd. I too would want to know why. And for what from trial prep in this case, what I can tell Your Honor is that some people say, that's how I remember what it is that I'm telling you. Like how I'm remembering 4 years later. It's because it was odd. It stood out to me. I think that's a permissible answer because they're saying this is how I'm able to recall it. Just a blanket statement of, I thought that was odd, and then we just move on. I agree. I don't intend to elicit that by any means. But I think when people are saying in the context of, that's why I'm remembering it, I think that that is not impermissible.
Well, it may not be. A lot of this is contextual. You know, a lot of it I have to hear how they're responding to something to be able to rule. So let me ask defense, other than sort of generally objecting to her commenting about oddness or unusualness of certain reactions she was seeing from Miss Brophy, is there some particular area, some particular statement that you think she's going to be called to make that you want to bring to my attention? Because it may just be that all we can do is have her testify and you object if we get to a point where you feel it's inappropriate, because until I hear what she's saying in the context in which she's saying it, I don't know how I will know.
Well, Your Honor, I mean, part of our concern, and I think this was clear from earlier statements, is that there's a 403 issue here. It's not clear that what she's offering is all that valuable. And there's certainly a downside to it. If the court were to listen to the audio of the interview with Detective Merrill, I think the court might better understand my concern, but she's a very voluble person. There are just all sorts of things that come
Okay.
out spontaneously.
How long is that statement?
Ooh, 10 minutes, maybe 8 minutes?
All right, let's just hear it. So I have some sort of sense of what we're about to wade
Because
into.
I think unless she's instructed not to say certain things, that she's gonna run with any question put to
Which
her.
we've done.
Do you have the entire thing?
Well, hold on a minute. Hold on. What have you instructed her not to say?
Specifically about her opinions about Miss Brophy's reactions. I've instructed her you cannot formulate an opinion on the stand regarding Miss Brophy's reaction, what you thought of that. I specifically have instructed her not to talk about that.
Okay.
So Your Honor, I'm expressing a concern here that we've worked really hard on this schedule, and we're now getting off track here. And why I'm bringing this up is they didn't have a problem with Miss Light on Thursday when she was going to be testifying in the afternoon. They all of a sudden have a problem with it here on Monday morning. And it's causing a significant delay on people in our trial where we have people that have to testify sometimes at certain times. And we fit them in. We've flown people in. We flew somebody in yesterday from Texas. We have somebody from California. We have to get these people to testify. And these delays that don't really seem necessary. All they're doing is preemptively stating an objection.
I'm not going to make either side. There are times when sides think of objections, either side, in the moment. Sometimes I think of it in advance, so I'm not terribly concerned about the fact that they hadn't had an issue with it on Thursday. But if you've already instructed her not to testify as to her opinion regarding the unusualness or oddness of the statements, then I'm fine proceeding. As far as timing goes, I'm also flexible if we need to, as far as shortening the lunch period or even potentially going a little late if we have to do that.
Okay, appreciate that.
But why don't you remind Miss Light then, and let's call her in and get started. Well, I guess we need a jury first, but why don't you use, one of you maybe remind her what the parameters of testimony are.
I can do
Your
that.
Honor, may I make one additional comment about timing?
Yeah,
The state is ending its case about 10 days before they plan to, maybe not quite that many, but considerably before. It should not impact the court's timing to rule on these things because they choose to bring in
well,
a large
it's
number of
not, I
witnesses.
agree with you, but if the defense is looking for an instruction to the witness not to testify about these opinions, and they're saying they've given that instruction, I don't know what else I can do other than have you object if you feel it's somehow getting past that instruction. But I agree with you that on the timing goes, I'm not going to shortchange rulings based on the witnesses' schedules. I would ask Mr. Overstreet, what is the state's current plan as far as when your case in chief is ending? Just so I have some idea.
As of last Thursday, I would have said for sure by this Wednesday,
Oh.
at the end of the day. I think there's a very good likelihood, given the motions that have been made and the request for numerous 104 hearings, that probably will carry us over into Thursday.
All right,
It's still not
I do want to do this, and I realize I'm going back, having a little bit of internal conflict. Let me hear the 10-minute, it's 10 minutes. Let me hear the 10-minute recorded interview. Is it really 10 minutes as far as the state is aware?
I honestly, Judge, we've been working off a transcript, so I can't really say.
All right.
But I don't think the discs are here in the office, aren't they? Do we not? No, we don't.
Brian Miller, is that what you understand?
Sorry.
Trying to get the time.
I think it, if we're getting on the record, it does say her time, so I'm pretty sure.
14 minutes, okay.
Yeah, and her address.
We may have an earlier lunch, or rather, sorry, we may have less of a lunch, but I do want to hear it.
And I would just ask that they redact the phone numbers and her home address.
Are you able to do that? When the home address or phone numbers are given, can you turn down the volume since we're being recorded? Okay. And when I say turn down, I mean so that we can't hear it. All right.
Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Breton, would you play Defense Exhibit 249, please?
Hello?
Hi, is this Miss Light?
It is.
Hi, this is Anthony Merrill. I'm a detective with Portland Police. I received your voicemail. Just calling you back.
Oh, hi. Thanks for calling back.
Yeah, is this an okay time?
Yeah. Take a
Great.
break from what I'm doing real quick.
Okay.
So, anyway, it's probably nothing, but it's just bothered me.
Okay. Yeah, no, I appreciate you
So,
calling. So,
Well, first of all, Nancy said a bunch of weird stuff. So, like I said, I wasn't really surprised when you arrested her. I really wasn't. I hadn't said anything to anybody, but in my
Really?
gut, I was thinking, God, could Nancy been involved? I'd never thought she would do it, but I thought maybe she would hire someone. I mean, you're just racking your brain, right, when you know the people?
yeah.
But then the other thing, and since you've already arrested her, I won't go into what she said, but so I remember we were standing around, like, it was me, I think it was
can
another...
I interrupt you for just 1 second?
Yeah.
Can I get just a little bit of background info on your relationship? Well, let me do this. Can you spell out your full name for me?
Yeah, Megan, Megan,
Okay.
Light, Light.
And what's your date of birth, ma'am? 464. And can I get an address for you?
Southeast 27th Street,
Okay.
Dougal, Washington. And could I just have you hang on a second, since
Yeah.
it might be a minute? I want to tell the person I was working with to go ahead on another
Of
project.
course, sure.
Okay, hang on.
Mhm.
It's going to be a few minutes to go on and measure other stuff. Okay, cool. Okay. Okay, date of
What's
birth,
your-
you got that?
Yeah, what's your zip code? And how long have you known Nancy?
I want to say we worked together in the early 90s. It's kind of a blur. I went to culinary school in 87, 88-ish.
Okay.
And that's where I first met Dan. He was my teacher at the culinary school.
So Dan was your teacher then? Okay.
Yeah. And we weren't good friends or anything like that. I just, knew him. And then,
Okay.
and again, I'm sorry, I have a pretty bad memory for way back events. But
Yeah, that's way
basically,
back.
then Nancy also went to culinary school, but a little bit later, that's where they met. And then I ended up working with Nancy. She had basically a catering business, chef de jour, and she was kind of the on-site caterer over at the Jewish temple in Northwest Portland. And
Okay,
so
let me catch up with you. So you worked with Nancy, but you met her at the culinary school?
Well, that's a blur because she didn't go
okay.
to school there the same year I did. I think I met her later, but I'm not even sure how. I might have gone back to the school to see about getting jobs, and I got connected through the placement or something. That part's kind of a blur. How I
Okay.
got the job with Nancy.
Okay, I'm taking notes as we're talking, so...
Sorry,
no,
it's
no
like
problem, I understand.
past life.
So
And
what was the catering place that you guys work for again, did you say?
well, it was her business, chef de jour, but we used the kitchen at the Jewish temple, or the Jewish, we call it temple. What's the big one over in Northwest Portland?
Oh,
It's like off Everett and 20.
I know which one you're talking about.
Yeah, it's the big one. And she basically was doing their, they have a lot of events. So we were catering, on site.
Okay.
And I feel like we did some off-site stuff too, but basically we were in that kitchen. That's where I was working with Nancy.
Okay, all right.
And then I think she was already together with Dan at that point. They met at culinary school, but again, she went after I did, but he was continuing to teach there. So then I got out of I got out of the restaurant business, and I got my real estate license in '94. And then I ended up selling them their house where they were living in Beaverton. I don't even remember what year that was. It was probably 96 or 97. I don't. You probably know when they bought that house.
That
I know.
sounds, close, I believe, so.
Yeah. So anyway, and then over the years, I'd run into. Then she got into real estate actually, and I'd run into him because then the other part was I got involved in the Oregon Mycological Society, where Dan would come and be the mushroom cooking demonstrator chef.
And what was it called? Oregon what?
Oregon Mycological Society.
Yeah, lycological, I'm not familiar. How do you spell that?
Mycological, study of wild
Oh, okay,
mushrooms.
now I'm with you. Okay,
Yeah, yeah. So he would come. We have a big fall show every year, and he would come and do the cooking demonstrations of how to prepare wild mushrooms, kind of thing.
Okay.
And he would bring students from the culinary school, and Nancy would show up, and I'd say, "Hey, what's going on? It's been a while. Good to see you. What are you doing? Da-da-da."
Uh-huh.
We weren't close friends. We didn't hang out, but I just, knew him for a lot of years. And when I saw him, it was always, pleasantries and
Yeah.
what's going on and how are the chickens and, that kind of stuff. And then Nancy got into insurance and, just caught up on all that kind of stuff. But it wasn't like we called each other and went and did stuff.
Okay.
So then, do you want me to fast forward to the vigil?
Yeah, unless there's anything in between that you think could be relevant to...
No,
Nancy?
not at all.
Okay.
I don't know. They always seem cheery together, and yeah, it's just,
Okay.
it's left us all scratching our heads.
Yeah.
So then at the wake, which was, 36 hours after he was found?
Mm-hmm.
It was Monday, it was that Monday after. I remember I was gone for the weekend out of Eugene. I arrived back and heard the news that it was Dan. I'm like, oh my gosh, and the vigil was going to be an hour. So, of course, I raced down there. And there's Nancy, and oh my gosh, Nancy, oh my God, I can't believe it. How are you doing? Da da da. He's like, and the first thing she said to me, oh, I was hoping you might show up. And I went, whoa, that is not what I was expecting to hear.
Right.
So that was one thing.
Okay.
And then the next thing was, we were kind of in a group, and people, of course, are saying, oh, I just hope they find out who did this, and this is horrible, da-da-da. And she said, well, I just want to know how it went down. Those exact words. I want to know how it went down. Like, okay, that seems odd. And then the final thing was she had said then, oh, there's going to be a memorial. It was going to be that Friday. And, of course, being the cooking background and all that, I said, oh, man, what can I bring? I'm happy to, make plateful of cookies, brownies. I can bring a potluck dish. What's going to be the deal? And she said, oh, well, don't worry about it. Culinary school has it all handled. Apparently, and this is not a quote because I can't remember exactly what she said, but the gist was, apparently when you get murdered at the school, they put on quite a spread.
Jeez, okay.
Yeah, I mean, really, whoa. And so I left there feeling like, okay, she's either in shock, she got some good drugs, I don't know what's going on, but that's not normal.
Okay.
So then the other piece that left me kind of...
Sorry, I'm taking notes. Let me get that last piece. I just want to make sure I don't mess that up. So you offered to bring food, but she said, don't worry, the OCI has it, and then she said...
Yeah, she said, the school has it all covered. She said, apparently, and I don't know if it was when you get shot, when you get murdered, when you get killed. It was, one of those kind of three. She's definitely said the school puts on quite a spread.
Okay, so when you get either shot, killed, or murdered at the school...
Well, she only said one of those. I just can't remember.
Right, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah,
one of the three, right?
Yeah.
Shot, killed, or murdered at the school.
They put on quite a spread.
They put on quite a spread.
Yeah, okay, it just gave me... I get chills even just thinking about it now.
Right.
So
okay, gotcha.
That was kind of that. And then at some point, I think after that, I'd never met Mr. Brophy before.
Okay.
So anyway, I was standing there. I'm pretty sure it was one of two women I remember were in the circle, people I had met that were Nancy's friends. One was an insurance agent friend, and I could figure out who it was if, you need any corroboration, or it was another lady that is another romance novel friend of Nancy's. So anyway, we were standing there with Mr. Brophy, and one of the other gals said, oh, Mr. Brophy, I'm so sorry. I just hope they figure out who this is. And he immediately said back, I don't think it really matters if they do. And, of course, this isn't verbatim either. I don't really think it matters if they do. We just need to move on. What's done is done, and we need to move on. And this is, I can see that in 6 or 8 months or a year after your son was just murdered 36 hours ago. But to not have any interest in figuring out.
That's Mr. Brophy, the father.
That was the father. And
he said...
he said he basically didn't care, and he said something to the effect that sometimes it drags the family through more and causes more pain than if you just let it go. You just got to let it go and move on. What's done is done. That was, I'm paraphrasing or whatever, but that was basically the gist of it. And I thought, that's not right. That's not how a father, to me. Anyway.
Okay, got it.
So that's the other thing, and it just, once in a while, I literally wake up in the morning and it just haunts me, and I think, God, should I call? No, it's probably nothing. They were in shock, and da-da-da. And I don't know,
Yeah, no, I'm glad you called. Do you know any of her writer friends at all?
No, the only one I met was a gal that was there at the wake. And
okay.
She gave me a card. It might be on my desk somewhere, but
okay.
I never knew any of them, no.
If you happen to find that card, would you mind calling my number and giving me the name and number? or
Sure.
address or something?
Sure.
Okay. No,
Yeah.
don't worry yourself over it. Just if you happen to find it, that would be great.
Yeah. Okay.
So I appreciate you calling.
Yeah, and then I mean, it seems like it's taking forever, and of course, it's just killing me to find out what's going on. How do I get trial information, or when it's gonna? Other than I guess it'll be on the news, but
Yeah, so I need to, let's see, hang on, I think I have the date here in my phone, just to make sure. So
I saw
the next
something
step,
about April.
yeah, the next step is a bail hearing for Nancy, and that is April, give me 1 second, I'm going to pull it up. April 19th.
Okay.
So it's at the downtown Multnomah County Courthouse.
Okay.
And it should start, I would imagine, at 8:30 or 9, I believe.
And can I ask, why is there because I thought there was already a bail hearing. Do they have to have it so often if they're being held in jail?
No, there was a grand jury that indicted her for murder. And there was this bail hearing had been postponed once, so maybe you saw a date before, but it got postponed to April 19th. And so, yeah, it's open to the public. You could come in and you could see that, and there's going to be a lot of information that gets disseminated during that. I'll be the one testifying, myself, another investigator, possibly some other people, but mostly me, kind of presenting our case through the deputy district attorney, who will be asking questions, and then the defense attorney will be able to ask questions.
And maybe will you be presenting things with motive too, or anything like that?
We'll be presenting a lot of information, is what I can tell you. I can't get too detailed with it until we actually do that. So, yeah. So, I mean, if you're interested, that would probably be the best forum to get the information as soon as possible.
Okay.
So, all right.
So yeah, if I come across that card, I'll get you the information.
Great. I appreciate
I hope that was helpful and wasn't wasting your time.
No, it wasn't wasting my time at all. I'm glad you called in. And any little bit, you never know where it could lead to next.
Exactly.
And these things always have a way of building sometimes, so we'll see.
Okay.
So thank you.
All right. Thank you.
All right. You're welcome. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
So I will tell the sides what I've heard, and I'm just saying this because the state has already instructed the witness, but just so everyone knows how I heard that exchange, Miss Light did indicate that she wasn't a close friend with Miss Brophy, that they didn't hang out, but they did exchange pleasantries, and there had been obviously some contact both through work and the selling of the house. The specific things that she sort of latched onto being different in her mind that I heard was Miss Brophy saying to her, I was hoping you'd show up when she came to the wake. And she said, it's not what I was expecting to hear. That was one thing. She also indicated, she used the words, I wanted to know how it went down, which for some reason struck her as odd. And then when she offered to bring something to the memorial, there was this comment about don't worry about it, the school has it handled. Apparently when you get murdered or shot or killed, not knowing which one at the school, they put on quite a spread. And she thought that was strange. And then she thought the thing with Jack Brophy was strange about him saying we just need to move on. Of course, she has no prior knowledge of Jack Brophy, had never met him before. And she started to say, although she didn't finish her sentence, that's not right, that's not how I father, and then she sort of trailed off. The point I'm making is it struck me that most of what she was saying in her analysis of whether it was odd or strange was based on her idea of what people normally do or what people normally say, as opposed to what Miss Brophy normally does or says. So again, until I hear exactly what she has to say and I hear the context, I can't make an advanced ruling, but I will warn the state that based on what I've heard so far, it seemed to me like her comments about things being odd or unusual were based on her expectations of how people generally normally react as opposed to Miss Brophy. But again, you've given her the instruction not to say these things, so let's get the jury in and we'll begin.
Okay, we'll get the jury. Do you want me to leave the record running or turn it off?
I can turn it off.
Okay, we'll turn off the record and mute the WebEx while I get the jury.
And thank you for your patience this morning. We know we're getting a late start. It's possible that we'll have a shorter lunch as a result. We'll just sort of see where we are. The state's ready for its next witness.
Yes, Your Honor, the state will call Megan Light.
All right. All right, Miss Light, you can come up here to the witness box, and if you would go ahead and step into it, but just stay standing for a moment, and my clerk will give you an oath.
I'll have you raise your right hand. Under the penalty of perjury, do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give in this case will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Okay, then you may be seated. And you can take off your mask. And then because we're being recorded, I'll just ask you to please state and spell your name, both first and last.
Megan Light, Meganlight.
Miss Light, there is a pitcher of water there if you want it.
I brought some water, thank you.
Okay, when you're ready.
All right, thank you, Your Honor. Ms. Light, I really just want to cover a few things with you this morning. But I want to start off with, do you know Nancy Brophy?
Yes, I do.
Do you recall when you met Nancy Brophy?
I want to say it was early 90s.
And did you know Dan Brophy?
Yes, I did.
How did you know Dan?
I met him when I went to culinary school in the late 80s.
You were actually a student of his, or did you just know him from the school?
I think he taught one of my classes. I can't recall which one, but
And you said that was in the late 80s? Okay.
I think it was 88.
But you didn't meet Nancy Brophy until the early 90s?
That's right.
Do you recall the circumstances of meeting Miss Brophy?
Not exactly. I think I was working with her. I worked for her with her catering company, Chef de Jour.
That was later on, though?
I think that's when I first met her, actually. Because I didn't go to culinary school. She wasn't there at the time.
Right, you went to school before she did?
Right.
Okay. And then you worked for Nancy at her catering business?
Right.
Okay. Do you recall about how long you worked for her?
Maybe a year. I feel like I was working in the off season when I was going up to Alaska in the summer to work, and I was working. I feel like it was a fall through spring.
Okay.
But I'm not exactly sure.
So not too long?
Yeah.
Okay. At some point, did you leave the culinary world and get into real estate?
Yeah, 1994 I got my real estate license.
And did you work with Dan and Nancy in terms of real estate?
I did.
And could you describe that, please?
It was a couple years after I got my license. I want to say it was 96. I had known Nancy previously and Dan, and then I had been keeping in touch like you do when you're a realtor. You know,
Your network?
keep in touch to get business, and they called me when they wanted to buy a house. I believe that was 96.
Okay.
So I was there. I represented them as the buyer's agent.
Okay. And you helped them purchase their home?
Right.
Okay. Now, were you also involved in the Oregon Mycological Society?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And can you kind of just, first of all, briefly describe what that is before I...
It's just it's a group of people, and we study wild mushrooms, and we go out and forage and hunt and go on field trips and learn about mushrooms.
And did you cross paths with Dan Brophy again as being part of that Mycological Society?
I did.
And do you recall in what capacity he was involved in that group?
He would come, and there was a lot of different parts to the mushroom show in the fall. There was a big show at the Forestry Center, and there'd be different tables with different aspects of mushrooms, and he led the culinary table doing cooking demonstrations of how to cook and eat wild mushrooms. So I can't remember exactly, but he would lead the group with the culinary school. They would come, so all the students would be working there with him.
Was he fairly involved in the Mycological Society?
Was I?
Dan, sorry. Dan Brophy.
Other than the mushroom shows, I don't think I ever saw him at any meetings or anything. He would just come in the fall.
Okay. Did you spend any time with, besides the interactions that you've had with Dan and Nancy over the years, did you otherwise just spend any time with them, friends outside of that?
No.
When you would meet up, what was that like? I mean, would you catch up, or would it just be talk about what you're doing in the moment?
I never had much of a conversation with Dan. I would see him, we'd say hi, how's it going? Everything's good. And how's Nancy? And he would say, often Nancy would also come to the mushroom show and I would catch up with her.
Okay. So you would
Also.
have conversation with Nancy, though?
More so Nancy, yeah.
Okay. How did you find out about Dan's death?
So that weekend, I was actually down in Springfield with my elderly parents. And I remember coming back, it was late on Monday afternoon. And I walked in the house and my partner, Brian, said, "Did you hear what happened at the culinary school?" And I said, "No, what?" I'd been out of touch. And he said that they had found Dan shot.
That was the first you had heard of it? Did you reach out to Nancy after you had heard about that?
Well, as it happened, I had just gotten home in the afternoon and the wake was happening at the culinary school in just, I think it was at 5 o'clock. I literally just turned around and ran out the door to go down there to the wake.
Okay, so when you returned from Springfield on that Monday, you heard that there was this wake and it was happening like soon?
Right now, yeah.
Okay. And so did you go down to that?
I did, yeah. I was actually a little bit late.
Did you see Nancy Brophy at that wake? Some people have called it a vigil, some people call it a wake, but either way, did you see Nancy there?
Yes, I did.
Did you interact with Nancy at that vigil?
I did.
In your interactions with Miss Brophy, interactions with Miss Brophy, was she emotional? Was she crying?
I think when I first was observing her from, I think she was speaking was the first time I saw her there. And she was teary-eyed. I wasn't very close.
Understood.
She was, yeah.
And what about when you actually spoke with her and were interacting with her?
I don't remember her crying or being emotional.
And just in general, I mean, was this an emotional event?
Yeah.
Was it emotional for you?
Yeah.
You said this was taking place on Monday afternoon. And I'm sorry, was it Monday or was it Sunday? You recall?
Well, I actually don't remember now. I felt like the wake or vigil was 36 hours from when they found Dan. For some reason, that's in my mind. But I also thought it was Monday, so I'm actually not, I guess I'm not sure if it was Sunday or Monday.
Okay.
It could have been possible that I came home on the Sunday afternoon.
Okay. Either way, it was the day you got home.
It was the day I got home, yeah.
And when you first saw Nancy Brophy, what did she say to you? Do you recall?
I do. She said, "Oh, I was hoping I might see you here."
Did she say anything else to you about what she thought had happened, or what information she had about what had happened?
Can you repeat the question?
Yeah, did Miss Brophy say anything to you about what she believed had happened?
Not exactly, no.
Did she express any sort of desire about wanting to know what happened.
Yes.
What did she say? Do you recall?
Well, it was kind of in response to what I said. I said, it's hard to know what to say at a time like that, but I said something like, I hope they figure out, who did this or something like that. And I remember pretty much exactly. She said, I just want to know how it went down.
Did Miss Brophy also tell you about a memorial that was planned at the Culinary Institute that was supposed to take place the following Friday?
She did. Well, it may have been Nancy, it may have been someone else, but somehow, once I was there at the vigil, I knew there was also going to be the more formal memorial on Friday, that next Friday.
So you're not sure exactly who you heard that from, but you were aware of it.
It was, yeah, I had learned at that time.
And did you talk to Miss Brophy about that memorial?
I did.
Did you offer any help?
I did.
And do you recall what you said to Miss Brophy?
I offered to, I asked what I could do to help. I was happy to bring trays of cookies or trays of appetizers, or, we'd been in catering together, so it seemed appropriate to offer to bring food to help with the service.
And how did she respond to that offer?
She said, you don't need to worry about that. Apparently, when someone gets killed at the culinary school, they put on quite a spread.
Is that the extent of your conversation that you had with Miss Brophy at that vigil?
That's about all I remember, yeah.
And then did you follow up with Miss Brophy after that? Did you reach out to her?
I did try. I feel like I tried to call her on her cell phone because there was another woman there that we connected and we were concerned about the case. I think we traded emails. Somehow I kept in touch with this woman, and I believe I got Nancy's cell phone from her, and I left a message, but I never got a call back.
Do you remember?
And then I found out the memorial had been canceled.
I see. So you didn't see her again after that? Did you see Nancy at all that summer after
No.
Dan's passing? And did she return your phone call?
No.
Do you recall how long after the vigil that you had made that phone call?
Probably 2 or 3 weeks since the Friday event didn't happen. Yeah, I mean, I can't really, it was shortly thereafter,
Okay.
just to see if she needed anything.
Within a few weeks, so you think?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. I don't think I have any other questions.
Thank you, Your Honor. Ms. Light, you had a conversation with Detective Merrill in March of 2019. Do you recall that?
Yeah, I don't recall the date,
Okay.
but I remember the conversation.
And did you reach out to Detective Merrill, or did he somehow learn of your existence and contact you?
I reached out to him.
And it does March 13th of 2019 comport with your memory of about when that would have been?
No, I actually have no recollection.
You don't know what it would have been?
That seems a lot further out than, I thought it would have been sooner than that, but I don't remember the date.
Of this page, starting in the middle of this
Need my
page,
glass.
don't read this out loud, just read it to yourself.
The highlighted part?
Well, this, where your name is, from this part down,
Okay.
and see whether that seems to be memorialized in the conversation that you remember having with Detective Merrill.
Okay. I don't remember some of that exactly. Or that's not how I recall it.
So is this though, what you recall is the first conversation you had with law enforcement about this case?
Yeah.
Okay, and does that March timeframe, March 2019 timeframe now seem accurate?
No, I don't, if that's what they have, then that's when I did it, but I thought it was closer to,
Okay, well, let's talk about something
Earlier
that
on,
was
so I
closer
don't
in
know.
time. Mr. Overstreet had asked you about a follow-up call, I guess, that you'd made to Ms. Brophy, and you recall that as being, maybe it would have been in July of 2018?
possibly, I thought it was within a few weeks. Yeah.
Well, that would have been from June 2nd, because he
Yeah.
was killed on June
Yeah.
2nd.
Okay.
Okay, and did you reach out to her? Do you recall reaching out to her both by email and leaving a voice message?
I feel like it was just a voicemail, but 'cause I don't know if I had her email.
Okay, and
Sorry, I can't
in
remember.
substance, was it your intent to invite her to your place in Washougal, that you were essentially trying to comfort her and inviting her to come out to your place if need be?
I don't remember that. It's possible. We have a nice, peaceful place. I might have offered that.
Okay, Mr. Breton, would you play Defense Exhibit 248? Right. Make sure you do redact it again, get the volume down. I'm sorry, 248, Your Honor.
248.
Hi, Nancy. It's Megan Light. How are you doing? I just want to check in on you. I feel bad I haven't contacted you yet. I'm sure you understand how time gets away. But anyway, no excuses. If you want company, I'd love to come over. And if you want a getaway, you could come up here to Washougal. We have a lovely spot. But anyway, I just wanted to check in on you. So thinking of you a lot and hoping you're doing okay. My phone
Mr.
numbers,
Britton, why don't you
my
stop
home
it there so
phone
we
is
don't get her phone number into the record?
Same one.
835-075.
All right, is that consistent with the message you remember leaving for her?
That sounds like me.
And that would have been somewhere in that July 2018 timeframe, a few weeks later?
I don't know.
Well, you'd indicated you thought it was a few weeks later. I'm
I
asking.
did, but I can't testify to the date.
Right, but in that timeframe, a few
Yeah.
weeks later. Okay.
I think so.
Okay. Now, you remember also telling Detective Merrill that the Brophies always seemed cheery together?
Well, no, I don't remember telling him that, but that is how I saw them.
You were able to observe them on some occasions, and that was your observation? Other than the Mycological Society meetings that it sounds like Mr. Brophy was presenting at, doing a demonstration at in the Falls, had you run into them on other occasions or seen them since you sold them the house in 1996?
I don't think so.
And when you sold them the house in 1996, they were purchasing the house together, were they not?
Mm-hmm.
I think that's it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any redirect?
Your Honor, could we just have a brief sidebar?
Sure. Let's do this. Why don't we step just into the hallway?
All rise.
All right, please be seated and redirect if there is any.
Yes, just very briefly, thank you, Your Honor. I just want to clarify, you said you thought you sold the Brophy's home in 96?
I thought it was 96, but now I'm wondering if it was 98
Okay, I just want to make sure we're talking about the same house. And so
on 106th.
if we were to say 1998 or 1999, does that also sound like that could be true?
Not 99.
Okay, you think maybe 98 though?
Oh, I thought it was 96.
I just want to make sure we're talking about the same house. I don't know that the date matters as much. Is this the home off of Southwest 108th Avenue? Do you recall?
I think it's 106th,
Okay.
Southwest 106th.
Okay. You did not sell another home to them at any time, though?
No,
Okay. Did you ever go to their home? Other than selling it to them?
I don't believe I did. After they closed on it, I don't think I ever went over there.
Okay. I don't think I have any other questions.
Right, may this witness be excused?
For the state, yes.
For the defense, yes.
All right, Ms. Light, you can step down. Thank you.
Your Honor, the state will call Brett Glendinning.
Okay. All right, sir, if you want to come up here into the witness box, we'll have you stand by this black chair for just a moment, and my clerk will give you an oath.
Okay, I'll have you step a little closer to the microphone and then please raise your right hand. Under the penalty of perjury, do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give in this case will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yeah.
Okay, then you may be seated and you may remove your mask. And then because we're being recorded, I'll please just ask you to state and spell your first and last name.
My first name is Brett, B-R-E-T-T. Last name Glendinning, G-L-E-N-D-I-N-N-I-N-G.
And I'm sorry, did you say Brent with an N or Brett?
Brett, B-R-E-T-T.
B-R-E-T-T, okay. All right, and just so you know, is it Mr. Glending? Is that how you pronounced it too?
Glendinning, it was close enough.
Okay. There is water there if you wish, but whenever the state's ready.
All right, thank you, Your Honor. I'm sorry, I'm gonna ask you one more time. Glendining or Glendinning?
Glendenning.
Okay. Thanks. So, Mr. Glendenning, where are you currently employed?
Calvix.
What is that? I'm sorry.
Calvix. It's a lighting company.
Lighting?
Yes. LED lighting manufacturer.
Where were you employed back in 2018?
I think it was Cadillac, Cadillac of Portland.
Is that Cadillac, the car company?
Yes.
Okay. And at some point in 2018, were you also employed at J&B Firearms?
Yes. That was the date range. I'm not sure the exact dates, as that was a while ago.
Were you employed there, if only answer if you can remember, but in February of 2018?
I believe so, yes.
And how long were you in the gun sales industry?
About 5 or 6 years.
Did you leave that business in 2018?
I do believe so, yes.
And that's when you think you went to Cadillac, or were you working there at the same time?
No, it was in conjunction. So
Okay,
I worked at Cadillac and J&B, and then I left the gun shop and Cadillac and went to Calvix.
And have you worked in the gun industry since then?
I have not.
As part of your duties at J&B Firearms, did you attend Expo Center? I'm sorry, gun shows that were held at the Expo Center?
I did, yes.
Okay. And we've heard a little bit about these gun shows, but would J&B Firearms actually have a table or a space set up where they would actually sell firearms at the gun show?
Yes.
And do you recall working at one of those gun shows in February of 2018?
Yes, during that time we worked about one a month, I think.
About one a month?
Correct.
Okay. And you yourself personally worked at these gun shows?
That's correct.
Would anybody else work there with you, or would you work the booth alone?
There'd be 2 to 3 people.
Now, thinking back to February of 2018, do you recall assisting Nancy Brophy with purchasing a firearm at the gun show?
Yes.
Now, I'm sort of assuming how this works, but you're sort of stationary at a table or some booth or something, is that correct?
Yeah, there's a kind of a circle, if you will. And we're inside the tables with our wares on the tables, and then people can walk up and ask about them, handle them, inquire about them.
And do you recall, you said you already recall helping Miss Brophy purchase a gun. Do you recall when she came up to the table and inquired about firearms?
I just had a kind of general interest in learning to shoot a handgun and just having a handgun. Yeah, so I mean, as far as the transaction goes, it's like any other transaction.
Okay.
So as far as specifics, it's hard to remember, but.
Was there anything unique about it that helps you remember the transaction?
I mean, not particularly. The receipt you had showed me, that was about the only thing that stuck out, because it's not very common to write stuff on the back of the receipt.
And we'll talk about that in just a moment. Do you recall if Miss Brophy was with anybody?
Not that I recall.
And she said that she was there to purchase a firearm?
Yeah, she was looking at getting into shooting and wanted to purchase a handgun.
Do you recall any other comments about why she was actually looking into getting a gun?
Not really. I mean, that was years ago at this point, so I don't really remember the entirety of the conversation.
Do you recall whether or not she expressed a concern to you about her own safety as to why she wouldn't need a firearm?
I don't remember anything like that.
Okay. Do you recall her saying that she was needing a firearm for research purposes?
No.
Do you recall whether she was inquisitive about a particular type of firearm, or how did she end up? I know I'm sort of jumping ahead. I know she bought a Glock. How did she get there? Was there a discussion about whether or not, or sorry, why one would choose a Glock over another gun?
Just based on just wanting to get into shooting handguns. So then from there, I would just go into my normal pitch of what kind of handgun do you want? I mean, do you want something that's super budget friendly, or, Yeah, so it was kind of just focused really on handguns.
And so did you sort of suggest that the Glock was going to be a good gun to start with?
That's kind of one of the guns I go to is typically between a Glock, either 17 or 19, Smith & Wesson M&P, or like a Canic. There's a couple of different models that we typically would carry, and so there's the really kind of budget friendly, and then there's the Glock that I was kind of lean on because that's the handgun that essentially, like, the further you get into your, shooting abilities, you can kind of adapt the firearm to you.
Okay. And specifically, the Glock 17, is that kind of what you're talking about?
Yeah, kind of your standard full-size frame handgun.
And do you recall whether Miss Brophy talked to you about any other needs for the gun other than just wanting to get into shooting?
Not really. I don't really remember. It was just, it's a basic firearm, so it was kind of the starting off point.
Do you recall whether she was expressing any concern specifically I'm sorry, not concern, whether she was expressing any desire to buy a Glock, or was she sort of relying on you to talk to her about what kind of guns?
Based on what I can remember, it was more relying on us, me in particular, as I was the one kind of handling the deal. But yeah, so it kind of just gravitated towards the Glock.
Okay. And did she ever try to redirect that conversation to a different type of gun or anything like that, or did she just kind of go with it?
Not that I remember. I feel like she just kind of went with it.
Okay. And ultimately, did you assist her in purchasing a Glock 17 Gen 4 9mm handgun?
Yes.
I'm going to show you what's marked as State's Exhibit 79, the receipt that you already referred to. You recognize that handwriting?
Yes.
Whose handwriting is that?
That's mine.
And is this the actual receipt from that transaction?
That is, yes.
Now, you talked a little bit about, I asked you if there's anything that stood out to you about this transaction. You said something about the writing on the back of this receipt.
Yeah.
Leading up to the writing on the back of this receipt, what sort of precipitated that? Do you remember the conversation?
It was just areas that you can go shooting, because if you're new into the kind of shooting sports world, I guess, you don't really know where you can go shooting, because it's not like you can just shoot at, a firearm anywhere. So most public lands you can, and so there was a spot that was kind of, at the time, was newly constructed out of North Fork Wolf Creek Road, like you're heading towards the coast in the mountains. There's shooting lanes kind of set up and kind of in a row out there, and so that was one spot. Anybody who's relatively new can go out there, and you can kind of essentially rub elbows with anybody that's been shooting for a while, and so they can either give you pointers or just strike up a conversation with some random people that you kind of meet out there. But there's always people out there, so it's always a good place for somebody who's a beginner to go.
Thank you for that. And I'm going to ask you a few more questions about that area in a moment, but were directions written on the back of the receipt to help her find that location that you're talking about?
Yes.
Okay. That's maybe a little hard to read. That's actually not your handwriting, is that correct?
That's not my handwriting.
Was that one of your coworkers?
I do believe so, yes.
Were you there when this discussion was happening, though, and these instructions were being written?
Yes.
There's also another writing at the bottom of this. Do you know what that says?
Threat dynamics. I'm not sure what that last word says right there, though.
Okay. The threat dynamics, do you recognize that?
Yes.
Is that another place that people can go shoot?
Yes. It's a little bit closer. If you don't want to go out to the mountains, it's an indoor shooting range, and they have a simulator inside, so you're not shooting a real gun, but you're shooting a simulated gun in a simulated environment.
Do they also have the ability to shoot real firearms there?
Yeah, they have an indoor shooting range. Yeah.
Now, I want to talk about these two different options that you gave, or you and your coworker gave Ms. Brophy. The first being this threat dynamics. You talked about it's an indoor shooting range, but it's also a simulated shooting range. Is this a place that you go and you pay money to use the facilities?
Yes.
Have you been there yourself?
I have not.
Okay. But you know it to be a place that you have to go and pay money to use the facility?
Yes.
Okay. Now, turning towards the North Fork Wolf Creek shooting range that you talked about out towards the Oregon coast, Is that a place that you have to check in and pay money to use?
No, it's the first come, first serve, just kind of out in public lands.
Okay. And this area, is there anything that you have to do? Like, do you have to interact with other people if you go up to this location?
Not really. No, I mean, you just not talk to people. It's kind of a good idea too, because if you want to go and get your targets or put targets up, you kind of want to let people know that you're going to be walking past the point of firing.
Sure. If you were to go up there at a time where there was nobody else there, would that alleviate the need for that?
Correct.
But at times, does it get pretty busy?
Yes, it does.
You yourself have been there?
Yes.
And you said at the time it was maybe a little different than it is now. Has it changed since then?
Not really. I mean, it's been used a lot more, but I mean, when it was first built, essentially, it was just fresh dirt, and now it's kind of been shot up a bit, so.
And so you said in 2018 that shooting range, this North Fork Wolf Creek shooting range, was relatively new?
Correct, yeah, within a year or two.
Is it common for people in your line of work at the time to give those types of directions to people,
Yes,
specifically to newer gun owners?
yes.
And Your Honor, at this time I would move to admit State's Exhibit 79, the J&B Firearms receipt from the gun show.
Any objection?
No objection.
All right, Exhibit 79 is admitted.
Now I want to ask you, while interacting with Ms. Brophy in purchasing this firearm, did you also provide any other education to her regarding the firearm, how to load it, how to strip it, things like that?
Yeah, so with most kind of entry-level gun owners, we always like to kind of show them how to break apart the firearm, field strip, if you will. How to clean it, take care of it, and stuff like that. And we always tell them too, like, if you have any other questions, you can stop by the shop and we can show you in greater detail. But yeah, like taking it apart and stuff like that, we did do that at the show.
And so that's something you would have showed her at the
Yes.
gun show. And did you also sell ammunition at the gun show?
Not typically. We might sell 22, like the random odds and ends, but as far as, 9mm and other, common calibers, we don't sell those at the gun shows.
And sorry, I don't mean to go back to this receipt again. I meant to ask you, can you determine from looking at this receipt, or do you independently recall whether or not Ms. Brophy used a card of some sort to pay for this, or whether she used cash?
I don't remember.
It's not noted on this receipt anywhere.
No.
So it could have been a card, it could have been cash, you just don't know.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. Now I want to talk to you a little bit about how you and your colleagues would prepare firearms for sale at gun shows specifically. And could we go ahead and put up 112? Actually, I'm sorry, can we start with 113? Thank you. I'm going to show you on that screen there in just a moment, a photo will pop up. It's marked as State's Exhibit 113. Sometimes it takes a second. There we go. So this is marked as State's Exhibit 113. Could you take a look at that zip tie on that firearm, and do you recognize that?
I do, yes.
Okay. What about it do you recognize?
It's the kind of zip tie we'd use on our guns at the gun show.
Okay. And so that's a zip tie that you would have, or one of your colleagues would have put on in preparation for being sold at a gun show?
That's correct, yes.
Is that different from how they're displayed in the store?
Yes, that's
And
correct.
how is that? Are there no zip ties in the store?
That's correct, yeah. We have them behind a glass case in the store.
So you add these zip ties specifically for the gun show?
That's correct.
Okay. And I know there's nothing proprietary, I suppose, about the zip tie, but do you recognize it because of the unique sort of holes in it?
Yes.
Now, when you sell a firearm like this, does it go to the customer like this, meaning the zip tie is fully intact? You don't break the zip tie before they leave with it?
No, it has to have that zip tie the whole time they're in the building.
Okay, so for it to leave the expo center, it has to have a zip tie like that?
Yes.
Now, if you were demonstrating how to handle a firearm, field strip it, things like that, is there a point during the gun show where you might have to actually cut that zip tie off?
Yeah, it's pretty common. If somebody wants to see how do you take apart the firearm, we will take the zip tie out, but that's when we have possession of it. If the client or customer has possession of it, that zip tie is always on.
Okay. So even if you did break it, you would always put a new one on before it walked out the door?
Yes.
Now, the way these zip ties are put in there, it's just through the slide and barrel, is that correct?
That's correct, yes.
Can you remove the slide and barrel from the frame without breaking the zip tie?
I imagine you could. I've never tried it, but
Usually when you're demonstrating, you would cut the zip tie.
yeah.
Now, do you give extra zip ties to the people who buy guns?
No.
So they would only leave with one intact zip tie through the slide and barrel of the firearm?
That's correct.
I'm going to show you what's marked as State's Exhibit 112. Just the same firearm laid over on the other side. I'm going to ask you to take a look at that slide and barrel and how it's seated on the frame. Have you seen this photograph before?
I have not.
Okay. When you put a zip tie through a slide and barrel, what does that generally cause the slide to do?
Just be retracted back slightly.
Okay. And when you say retracted back, do you mean it would be further forward on the frame or farther back off of the frame?
Further back off the frame.
Okay. Actually here, I'll just kind of hide it from you. This, if you don't mind. Yeah. And this is also up on the screen behind you. If you can kind of point to the point of the firearm where you're talking about what you expected to see when a zip tie is installed.
So obviously that you can clearly see that zip tie there, but this isn't seated flush back right there. And the slide just looks like it's not fully seated on the firearm.
Okay. Now, with a zip tie in, would you actually, I think you said this, you'd actually expect to see that slide a little farther back off of the frame perhaps, maybe not totally flush?
Correct.
Okay. You can go ahead and take a seat there. Thank you. So obviously you spent a lot of time around firearms over the years, and although you're not in the business anymore, it still sounds like you have firearms and still use them. When you look at that and you think about how you send guns out the door at a gun show, would you expect to see that on a gun that you sent out the door?
Now, as far as the zip tie goes?
Sorry, the slide and barrel being forward on the frame instead of back.
Yeah, as long as the zip tie's in there and it's still intact, there's going to be no round seated in that chamber because it will not fit.
Sure. And maybe explain to the jury, how do you insert one of those zip ties? How do you manipulate the firearm in order to insert one of those zip ties?
You lock the slide back all the way, and once it's locked in place, you got your other hand so you can slide the zip tie down through the barrel into the breech and then just connect them. If you have to, you can add another zip tie. Obviously, that depends on the length of zip ties, but just sliding the zip tie down the barrel and then closing it off.
When you say locking it back, you mean you actually slide the slide all the way back and there's a little thumb lock that holds it into place?
Yes, just behind the trigger up against the slide, there's the button to lock back the slide.
And if you were to do that, would that cause the firearm to be fully seated onto the frame by making that action?
By releasing that, to have the slide move forward, it would be fully seated. Even with that zip tie too, it could fully seat to where it's almost in full battery, but with the amount of space that zip tie takes up, you could not physically stick a bullet in there.
Sure.
Without it actually being fully seated.
Yeah. So it's possible to not disturb that zip tie then and fully seat this firearm onto the frame.
I mean, if you had a really thin zip tie, like the zip ties we've used, you could jam it forward and it would probably fully seat.
And I'm sorry, when I'm saying fully seat, I think we might be talking about two separate things.
Okay.
When you're saying fully seat with that zip tie, you're meaning the slide can't go all the way forward because of the space of the zip tie is creating. Is that correct?
It could. I've seen it before, especially with the zip ties that we've used in the past. You could have it seat all the way forward to where the breech is actually level with the slide, but there's still an obstruction in the chamber.
Right. And I think you and I think I understand where maybe the disconnect is, and it's in my question, so I apologize. When I'm saying fully seated, I'm talking about the frame being seated, the slide and barrel being seated onto the frame itself.
Oh, yes. So as far as removing those items with the zip tie in, I don't know if that's possible. I'm not sure. I've never tried it.
Sure. But regardless of the zip tie, whether the zip tie is on it or not, in order to put the zip tie on, the slide needs to be seated onto the frame. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. When one purchases a firearm at a gun show, is there a background check that must be done?
Yes.
And is that done on the spot?
Yes.
And that's done through the state of Oregon?
Correct, yeah. Through the state trooper, I think the state trooper's office, yeah.
And so when Miss Brophy and anybody else who wants to purchase a firearm like this at a gun show, they actually have to pay $10 and go through a background check.
That's correct, yes.
Okay. And is that true in the brick and mortar store as well? You have to go through a background check?
Yep. That's correct.
Yeah, I think you touched on this talking about budget-friendly models. Was the Glock that she purchased, is that something you're referring to as budget-friendly, or were there other options if you wanted to save a little bit of money?
Yeah, there's a few other options if you want to save a little bit of money. Glock is kind of middle of the road.
Okay.
So it's extremely reliable, so you never have to really worry about it failing. So it's a good model to go with.
Okay. So there's certainly more guns out there that are quite a bit more expensive, and there's some that are less expensive. Is
That's
that fair
correct.
to say? And I know we talked about this receipt, but the purchase price of that Glock, was it $499?
I don't remember exactly. If that's on the receipt, then that's the price.
Okay. Okay, thank you, Mr. Glendenning. I don't think I have any other questions for you.
Okay.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good morning, Mr. Glendenning.
Good morning.
So it sounds like you haven't been at JMB for a couple of years now, right?
That's
About
correct.
3 years, maybe 4? Okay. To the best of your recollection, the shows at the Portland Expo Center, and that's where you met Ms. Brophy, correct?
Yes.
What you're talking about. Were those 3-day shows, 4-day shows, 2-day shows?
Saturday and Sunday, so we'd set up Friday and then work, Saturday and Sunday.
And then prospective customers could come in for 2 days?
Correct.
Okay. Can you describe to us a little bit about just the volume that you were contending with at those shows? How many, I'm going to ask you about how many you sold, but how many people do you think you were just interacting with and answering questions for over the course of a typical weekend at that particular show?
In total, probably maybe 20 to 30 people throughout the course of the 2 days.
Okay. And how many of those turned into actual sales in an average show in that time period at that particular show?
That really varies depending on kind of the current situation going on with any major kind of disaster, new president, stuff like that. So depending on what is happening at the time, so that can widely vary the amount of people that I actually talk to. Because there's been gun shows I've talked to a handful of people. There's been others where I'm just back to back for essentially 8 to 10 hours. I'm just talking with people about firearms.
Okay.
So it's hard to remember at that show how many people I actually talked to.
Okay, and what's your recollection of, this is early 2018? What's your
It's
recollection of how the volume was compared to normal?
from my recollection, it wasn't a lot. Most of the time, it's in the spring months when you start to see a pickup in sales at gun shows because people are getting ready. They start, doing their summer activities of going out and sport shooting, stuff like that.
And how many of those people that you talk with, and I do want you to stay as oriented as you can to this time frame of 2018 and this particular show at the expo, but what percentage of the people that you're talking with and then selling to, those are two different questions, are first-time buyers?
I'd say probably 10 to 20%.
Okay.
Typically more experienced people go to gun shows. So somebody who's relatively inexperienced, they'll typically go to a brick and mortar store, just from my experience.
Okay, but at a gun show, you think it's gonna be somewhere in that 10 to 20% range, is that what you said, or did you
Yeah,
say
10 to
higher?
20%.
Okay, all right. How does I think you termed it a spiel, the sort of the routine that you go through when you're talking with
Yeah.
these customers. If you're actually selling a gun to a first-time gun owner, what kinds of things would you expect? And to the extent that you remember specifically talking with Mrs. Brophy, that would be helpful, but.
So typically I would start off with how much experience you have, shooting a handgun, and then to kind of look at, well, what would you want to get? Because ultimately it's up to the customer. So I'm gonna ask what they want, and then if we have that model, I'll put that model in their hands. Now, granted, there's a cable, so they can't actually grab the gun and walk off, but they can, hold the gun in their hands because the only time you ever use a firearm is when it's in your hands. So it's got to feel comfortable in your hands. And there's just a couple other like small things, and then just asking caliber, stuff like that. And if they don't know, I typically try to get them towards 9mm because it's relatively inexpensive, has little recoil. That's kind of the spiel.
Okay, and is there a part of your spiel that addresses gun safety, learning what to
Yeah,
do?
of course.
And how much time would you expect that you spend with a typical first-time buyer talking about how to make sure that
Probably
they use
the
it?
majority of it. I would say the majority of it. It's because that's kind of as somebody who's selling a firearm, it's kind of our obligation to make sure that they understand that it's a pretty serious item. It's not like you're just going to the grocery store and buying an apple. It's you're buying something that has the potential for great destruction. So to treat it with that kind of level of respect.
Okay, and you talked a little bit when Mr. Overstreet was asking you questions about going through the process of cleaning it, and you used the term field stripping. Can you tell us what specifically you mean by field stripping?
Field stripping a firearm is basically breaking it down into its individual components, so slide, barrel, and frame. As far as a handgun goes, there's the recoil spring, stuff like that. So there's about 4 or 5 moving parts that you can kind of take out, and that's basic cleaning and field stripping.
Okay, now, I take it part of the advice to a first-time buyer is know what you're dealing with, know how the gun works, know how to take it apart, how to put it back together.
Yes.
But you also related that to cleaning. Did you give her an instruction or a lesson in how one would clean a gun?
I believe that was my boss at the time, James. I think he broke it down in front of her while I was handling the transaction of the background check.
Okay. And is the idea that when you do use a gun, you should clean it after each use, or how often were you recommending cleaning?
I typically want to clean it after each use.
Okay. So it's important to, well, I guess I'm presuming this, maybe you're not saying this, but is it important to clean it well enough that you actually engage in some disassembly? Or how does that process work?
I mean,
What's a routine cleaning?
You could clean a fire, especially a handgun. You can clean a handgun without actually field stripping it. I typically always recommend field stripping it to add a new layer of oil and remove the old layer of oil. But I mean, if you're just gonna clean the barrel, you can just lock the slide back and just run like a bore brush through it.
Okay, so there's a quick way to clean it, and then what you described as the better way to clean it?
Correct.
Now, you had talked about, I guess there were two different places you recommended or you wrote on the back of the receipt if Ms. Brophy were going to actually go out shooting, that she could get some lessons or get some experience. Is that right?
I didn't write that on the back of the receipt, but we did. My boss and I, we did, explain these two areas. So there's and Sherwood, I think, Threat Dynamics that's the indoor shooting facility, and then North Fork Wolf Creek Road, which is kind of the public space out in the mountains.
Okay, and I'm sorry, you must have, I thought you first identified that as your handwriting, but you're saying that was Mr.
On the front of
Goldman?
on the front of the receipt, that's my handwriting, but on the back, that is not mine.
Okay, now I'm tracking. So you have been to, it sounds like you haven't spent much time at Threat Dynamics, is that correct?
No, I don't really enjoy shooting indoors.
Okay, but you have gone to that second range that you mentioned, the public range,
That's correct.
and you said that that's become quite a bit more popular since
That's
it
correct.
opened up. How, just from your experience, the times you've been out there, what percentage of the people out there shooting are women? What's the ratio of men to women?
2/3 men, 1/3 female.
Okay. And what about age demographics? Could you just describe a little bit more sort of the types of people that you see out there?
That's kind of hard because I've seen about every age group you can imagine out there. So really young people to fairly older people.
Okay. And when you've been out there, what on the average, how many people would you say were out there with you besides you? How many people were actually using the range or hanging out with people who were using the range?
So there's 4 individual spots out there. It's kind of hard to describe without actually kind of pulling it up on the map. But there's 4 different lanes and they're kind of separated. So anytime I go out there, I try to go to one of the longer distance ranges. And there's always other people there, and so I just ask them if I could just shoot next to them. And most people always oblige. So
Okay, so on average, how many people would you say were out there?
4 to 6.
Okay. And maybe this is my interpolation, but it sounds like one of the ranges is a little bit more like the bunny slope on the ski slope. It's a shorter range, a little bit easier.
Not really. It's just first come, first serve. So it's not like there's an advanced shooting range. They're all kind of just open swaths of land that you can set up a target. So really, it's as hard as you make it.
Okay, all right. That's a good picture. I think that's all I have for you.
Redirect. Yeah, okay, sure. No, that's all right. Go ahead. Go ahead.
I think that's good. Thank you.
All right. Now any redirect.
Yes, briefly. Mr. Glendenning, when you've gone out to this range, do you go out there every day of the week, or is it generally on weekends?
Typically on weekends.
Okay. Is it a little bit, I guess, and do you go early in the morning? Do you go in the afternoon?
Early to midday.
Have you ever been out there on a Monday or a Tuesday?
Not that I can remember.
And this isn't something that is like open and closed at certain times, right? It's just kind of open.
Yeah, so I don't believe you can really shoot on public lands, during the night.
Sure.
I can't see at night that well, so I'm not going to go shooting at night. But typically, I go when I can see.
Also, probably just not in general a good idea to be shooting.
Very true. With that said, there is a gate. I'm not sure when that gate closes because they also do active logging out there. Sure. So sometimes that road's not accessible to the public just due to safety concerns.
That makes sense. But nonetheless, they don't have like hours, like 8 to 5, Monday through Friday.
That's correct. Yeah.
It's just an open area. Maybe the gate's closed sometimes, but that's just the luck of you driving all the way out there just to be turned around.
That's true.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't think I have any other questions. Thank you. For the state, yes.
For the defense, yes.
Your Honor, would it be okay if we just took a short break at this time while we prepare for the next witness?
How much time do you need?
Oh, 5 to 10 minutes.
All right. Why don't we just take a 10-minute break then and plan to be back on at 11:25.
Thank you.
We'll go off record and we'll use the witness.
All right.
agreeing, with respect to Ms. Light, that we will not, in closing statement, make an argument about her wanting to involve herself in the case.
Right, so just to put on the record, we did take a sidebar, which was not on the record, and the state had pointed out that defense had asked Miss Light whether the detective contacted Miss Light or Miss Light contacted the detective. And the answer was that Miss Light had contacted the detective. The state was concerned that that opened the door to the question, why did Miss Light contact the detective? Their concern being that in some way, shape, or form, defense would argue during closing arguments that there was some significance to the fact that Miss Light had contacted the detective as opposed to vice versa. So what I had said to defense and to the state, although Ms. Maxfield wasn't present for this, I had said that I'll instruct defense not to argue there's any significance as to who contacted who, and that will keep the door closed as to the state then asking Miss Light why she contacted the detective, because of the concern was that she would then start to say that things had seemed strange or odd or unusual to her, and we would get into the kind of testimony that we had spent time working to make sure would not come in. So that's where we were. Does anyone need to add to that?
I don't think so.
No, thank you, Your Honor.
All right.
We'll go off the record and on the WebEx. Good morning, this is the court clerk. Once again, we're not on the record yet, but are getting ready to get going. This is another reminder to everyone on the WebEx to please make sure that your videos are all the way off and you are muted entirely, and to ask everyone in the courtroom to make sure that all cell phones and electronic devices are completely off. We'll be back in just another couple minutes. All rise.
All right, please be seated. And the state's next witness?
Yes, Your Honor, the state will recall Detective Anthony Merrill.
Okay. Detective Merrill, we will swear you again since there's been a gap.
Under the penalty of perjury, do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give in this case will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Then you may be seated, and then again, for the record, please state and spell your first and last name.
It's Anthony Merrill, ANTHONY MERRILL.
Okay, when you're ready.
Your Honor. Detective Merrill, I just want to ask you a few questions briefly this morning. As part of your investigation in this case, did you obtain and execute a search warrant for Nancy Brophy's home on September 5th of 2018?
Yes.
And when you executed the search warrant on September 5th of 2018, inside the home, did you locate a business card with Miss Brophy's name on it?
Yes.
Will you please show States Exhibit 56. And, this will pop up on the screen there in a moment. And do you remember the general whereabouts where you located this business card?
I can't remember if it was from the fire mantelpiece in the living room or possibly upstairs in the bedroom with some other paperwork. I think it was one of those two places, I believe.
And you had previously spoken with Miss Brophy, and she had indicated to you that she was, in fact, in the insurance industry.
Correct, yes.
And I want to direct your attention to the bedroom and bedroom closet. Was that part of your search as well?
Yes, it was.
Did you find anything of note in the bedroom closet?
Yes, of note, we found a HP silver laptop in a box.
Can we look at States Exhibit 57, please? And if you could look at what's marked as States Exhibit 57, is that the computer that you're referring to?
Yes, it is.
Okay. And this, I believe you said this was in the closet?
Yes, upstairs, there's an upstairs bedroom with an adjacent walk-in closet, and it was found in the walk-in closet.
And did you also find another computer in the home?
Yes, we did, near the bed in that same upstairs bedroom. So not in the closet, but in the bedroom near the bed.
I'm going to show you what's marked as States Exhibit 58. Is that a picture of that computer?
Yes, it is.
And were both of these computers turned over to Aaron Sparling for analysis?
Yes, they were.
Now, as part of that search warrant of the home, that just authorized you to collect these computers, is that correct?
That's correct.
Did you subsequently obtain another search warrant in order to have these computers analyzed?
Yes, we did.
Now, did you also obtain and execute a search warrant on a public storage unit that you believed was rented by Nancy Brophy?
Yes, we did.
And what, if anything, did you find in that storage unit?
There was a ghost gun Glock kit.
Anything else of interest in the public storage unit?
That was the main item of interest. There were some clothing articles and books, I believe. Some of the books that Nancy had authored.
Okay. And as part of this investigation, did you also obtain and execute a search warrant on POD's storage units rented by Nancy Brophy?
Yes, we did.
And was there anything of interest in those storage units?
There was, I believe, a few more books, some journals, but nothing that we could find that was relevant.
Thank you, Detective. That's all the questions I had for this morning. I would move to admit States Exhibit 56, 57, and 58.
No objection.
All right, 56, 57, and 58 are admitted, and cross-examination.
Looks like I have one question, but I need to read it better. When did you ask Aaron Sparling to analyze the computers?
I'm not sure the exact date by memory. I know it was subsequent to the, obviously to the search warrant and collecting those items. I don't remember the exact date though.
We'll come back to it later. Thank you.
You're welcome.
That one question.
No, Your Honor.
All right, I can step down.
And the state will call Eric McDaniel to the stand.
Eric McDaniel, okay. right, Mr. McDaniel, we'll have you come up here to the witness box, and if you can just go ahead and step into it, but remain standing while my clerk gives you a note.
Yes, sir.
Under the penalty of perjury, do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give in this case will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Okay, then you may be seated and you may remove your mask. And then because we're being recorded, I'll just ask you to please state and spell your first and last name.
First name is Eric, E-R-I-C. Last name McDaniel, M-C-D-A-N-I-E-L.
All right, and there is a pitcher of water there if you want it, but then whenever you're ready, Ms. Herman.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good morning, Detective McDaniel. How are you currently employed?
With the City of Portland Police Bureau,
And how long have you been in law enforcement?
26 years.
And can you walk us through sort of your trajectory in law enforcement and then where you currently are assigned?
I've worked patrol for 12 years. Started with the Los Angeles Police Department. Came here and worked a patrol, total of 12 between Los Angeles and here. Became a detective in 2007, where I worked property crimes. I had been a cold case homicide detective for almost 8 years. That unit got disbanded last week, so now I'm assigned to the homicide unit.
All right. And in your capacity as assigned to the cold case homicide unit, did you at times, obviously now you do, but prior to last week, did you at times then work with active homicide investigations?
Quite often, and well over 130 in the last 5 years.
And so what would that look like in terms of, would you go out to the scene? Did it depend?
It was different. Well, the majority of the time I go out to the scene and do crime scene. I guess we call it crime scene, but just documenting evidence. I would interview witnesses. Sometimes I'd go to the autopsies the following day.
All right. And so if you recall back in June of 2018, is that the same capacity you were working at that time?
That's correct.
And do you recall if you went to the Oregon Culinary Institute on June 2nd of 2018?
I did not.
And so at some point following that initial call out and response, did you get involved in this case?
I did.
And do you recall roughly when that was?
It would have been September of 2018.
All right. And so in September of 2018, what were you asked to do or help with?
I was asked to help with the execution of a search warrant at a public storage facility in Beaverton, Oregon.
And was that on September 8th of 2018?
That's correct.
And so when you got to the storage facility, I assume there was a team of you that were there?
There were several of us, that's correct, yes.
And what was your responsibility?
My responsibility was to help with the search within the storage unit, which, if I remember correctly, was several, I couldn't tell you the number, but a lot of boxes, cardboard boxes, needed to be searched.
And so what, did you just take a box and kind of go through it and then another one, or what did that
That's
look like?
correct, yes.
Okay. And was there a particular box that you noted and then opened where you found something of interest?
There was.
And can you describe sort of what that looked like and then how you opened it and what you saw as you went through it?
It's a cube-shaped cardboard box, taped at the, taped closed at the top. It had writing on it. It appeared to be, written by hand. I believe it said scars, purses, and GK.
And before you opened the box and looked further, did GK stand out to you in any particular way?
I don't recall that that it even sunk in with me until after opening the box and making a discovery, then looking back at the box once I made the discovery.
All right. And so I assume you took the tape off or cut the tape?
Ripped it off, peeled it off.
All right. And so as you opened the box, what did you see?
It was mostly the purses, and I refer to it as fabric type material that one could call a scarf. I just didn't know if that's what I was dealing with, but it had the contents that were documented on the outside of the box.
And when you opened it, did you just look in or did you start taking items out?
Taking items out and setting them aside so I could get a get a good thorough search of the entire box.
And so as you're doing that and removing items, did something catch your attention in the box?
Yes.
And what was that?
It was a black plastic Glock handgun box that, I've owned 4 or 5 of those boxes through my life, so it's very distinct. You know what it is when you see it.
And so did you like pick it up and remove it and realize it, or as you're taking items out, did you see it and recognize it?
I recognized it, left it in place, and then notified the lead detectives.
And once you kind of notified the people there, did someone come over and take photographs?
I believe the criminalist did.
I'm going to show you what we've marked as State's Exhibit 62. It'll pop up on the screen there in front of you in just a second.
Okay.
And do you recognize that?
I do. That's the box we've been speaking about.
And it looks like someone's hand is pointing then to some writing in red.
That's correct.
And is that the writing you're referring to?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And we can see a little bit inside the box, and we'll go to a better picture in just a second. But there's what appears to be a black box in there. Is that the box you're referring to?
That's correct.
We'll go to State's Exhibit 63. And here's kind of a better lighting shot. Is this what you've been describing?
Yes.
And is that the box as you found it once you'd removed some items?
That's correct.
And I assume, just for reference, that this is the scarf-like material or fabric you're describing?
That's correct.
And so there was more of that on top that you removed?
That's right.
All right. And ultimately, was the Glock box, as you've described it, then removed from the box?
It was.
And I'm going to show you what's been marked as State's Exhibit 25. I'll put a sticker on it in just a second.
Okay.
And do you recognize that?
Yes, I do.
And is that the box that we've been talking about?
Yes.
And if you could open that up and take a look at that.
Okay.
I'll just write mine up there. And does that appear to be the contents as they were at the time you found it?
Well, I never opened the box.
Oh, gotcha. Okay. And so you didn't touch it, disturb anything, take anything out of it?
As soon as I saw it, as you see sitting, I advised the lead detectives.
All right. Okay. And then did you take any other action that morning or find anything else of interest in your search?
I did not. I continued the search once the gun was the gun box was removed, and then that nothing of note.
And nothing in this box or another box?
That's correct.
Okay. I'm gonna put that on there so I don't forget. All right. And following your assistance with the execution of this search warrant, were you later in the coming months asked to do another piece of the investigation?
I was.
And was that related to getting some more specifics about a series of vehicles?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And we've heard from Detective Law already. It sounds like the two of you were given a list and you sort of split it up.
That's right.
Okay. And specifically, were you looking at determining the color and perhaps looking at photographs of specific Toyota Siennas with certain license plates?
We were attempting to determine color on the list we were given, and also I attempted to determine whether the vehicle was even local during the time frame that involved this investigation.
Okay, which would have been June of 2018.
Right.
All right. And it looks like you personally looked into 9 of the vehicles. Is that right?
That's correct.
And the license plates of those vehicles all either had a 67B as in boy or a 67E as in Edward. Is that right?
I would have to look at each one, but
We just double check as you're scrolling through.
That's correct.
All right. And of all of the vehicles all 9 that you looked through, if you determined that they were in the area or could have been in the area at the time, were you able to obtain photographs and or check out the vehicle yourself?
Can
Let me
we
reword
break it
that.
down? Thank you.
Yeah, let me reword that. All right, so for each of those, with the exception of maybe one vehicle, were you able to determine the color of the vehicle?
That's correct, I was.
And I forgot to ask, had you previously been provided with a still image of surveillance video?
I believe I was, yes.
Okay. And so if any of the vehicles you determined were either gray or silver or some variation of that color, did you then get photographs or a visual of the vehicle?
I attempted to get a picture of the vehicle, no matter the color. It was my job just to compile this information and pass it on to Detective Merrill for his determination as to whether it's a vehicle of interest or not.
And in fact, in some cases, did you actually ask out-of-state law enforcement to assist you with that?
I did.
And confirm, even if the vehicle was registered out of state, you still got the out-of-state license plate to confirm what was going on with it?
And on 2 occasions, actually got photos from either the officer themselves or from the license plate reader camera.
And of all the 9 vehicles that you looked into, did any of them have any match or interest in the vehicle that you had been given the photo of?
No, ma'am.
And at this time, I'd offer States Exhibit 62 and 63, the 2 photographs.
No objection?
62 and 63 are admitted.
And that's all the questions I have.
All right, cross-examination?
Thank you. Good morning, Detective.
Good morning, ma'am.
So, Exhibit 63 in front of you, is that, I think your testimony was that you had partially unpacked that box?
Well,
before
I'm
that
looking
photo was
at,
taken?
I'm sorry, I'm looking at Exhibit 62.
Oh, I'm sorry. It looked like 63 up there. So 62, that's the box you were testifying about, and it sounded like you partially unpacked it before that photograph was taken?
I unpacked it to that point
Okay.
that we see.
Was it full of other things that are like the thing, other than the Glock box in there, other than the gun box in there? Were the other items in that box similar in nature to those?
To the scarves and purses?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. And were those all neatly folded, or did they seem like they'd been kind of tossed into the box?
I don't remember.
But you hadn't disturbed anything that was under that box by the time the photo was taken, is that correct?
That's correct.
Did those, with the exception, I mean, ignoring for a second the box with the gun kit, were those things that were consistent with packing up the contents of a bedroom closet?
I don't know.
Okay, but did they look like clothing items, the kinds of things you'd see in a closet?
Well, I don't have scarves and purses in my closet, so I can't speak for that.
I won't ask if you're married. But they're all clothing items.
They're scarves and purses, ma'am. Purses, I don't think are clothing items, but, they're accessories
Okay.
along with scarves.
Okay. And the storage unit that you found that in, what size was that unit?
I don't know.
Remember?
I don't remember.
Can you give us an estimate, and I realize this was a couple of years ago, but can you give us an estimate of how many boxes there were in there to go through?
A lot. I don't know. They were stacked deep and high.
Okay, so it was a pretty good sized unit, it wasn't a small unit?
And we're, again, your interpretation can be different than mine, so I don't.
Right, and
Don't know.
I'm asking you to give us an estimate beyond a lot. Can you do better than a lot?
A lot of boxes? No, I can't without actually seeing photographs and counting them.
Okay, and you didn't write a report from this incident?
Yes, I did.
In your report, do you make reference to that, the size of the unit?
No, I don't.
All right. Okay, that's it, thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Any redirect?
Sure. And Detective McDaniel, just to be clear, you wrote 2 separate reports in this case, is that right?
That's correct.
One regarding the search and one regarding, of the storage unit, and one regarding the license plates?
That's correct.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Okay, may Detective McDaniel be excused?
Yes, Your Honor.
For defense?
Yes.
All right.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. It is. It is 5 till noon. I'm not sure if the state had another short witness they wanted to take.
We don't, Your Honor. Those were the 2 we were hoping to get done
All
before
right.
the lunch hour.
And we are still on track then if we come back at 1 o'clock. Is that correct?
I believe so.
All right. So what we're going to do is have a little bit shorter lunch than we've been having, just so we can stay on track. Well, we're going to shoot to be back on the record at 1 o'clock. So Ms. Lou will talk to you about when to have you all back.
Okay, Judge will go off record and mute the WebEx. All rise.